Today we'll be talking about our non-renewable energy sources. Non-renewable energy. These are sources that cannot be replenished in a short period of time. Coal, petroleum, natural gas, propane, and uranium are all examples of non-renewable energy. When we run out, we run out. These sources are often used to generate electricity, heat homes, fuel vehicles, and manufacture products. The majority of these non-renewable energy sources are fossil fuels. A fossil fuel is a fuel that was formed from the remains of tiny sea plants and animals that died hundreds of millions of years ago. When these plants and animals die, they sink to the bottom of the ocean, creating a layer of organic material. They're buried by sediment and sand, which over millions of years of piling up and pressure turns into sedimentary rock. As the rock builds on top of it, creates more pressure and more heat, which chemically changes the mixture of organic materials made up of dead plants and animals into a hydrocarbon. Hydrocarbons are organic compounds that are made up entirely of hydrogen and carbon. This visualization shows the process of creating fossil fuels. All the way to the left, we have tiny plants and animals that over time die and sink to the bottom of the ocean. More and more sediment, sand form rock over the pile of dead animals and plants. Millions of years later, we see solid land where there once was ocean. Underneath that solid layer of rock and stone, we see the oil or gas. We see our fossil fuels trapped below. That's where we come in. We dig them up and use them in order to power our vehicles, heat our homes, or generate electricity. Petroleum, natural gas, coal, and propane are the fossil fuels that we use. Because it takes millions of years for these energy sources to form, we consider these non-renewable. It takes significantly longer, millions of years longer, to create this energy than it does for us to consume it. Petroleum is commonly known as oil. This is where we get our gasoline from. Petroleum is the crude form, the form that we pull out of the ground. Oil wells are dug about 6,000 to 20,000 feet below the surface in order to reach that layer underneath the sediment, that layer that was once organic plants and animals, but is now a pile of hydrocarbons that we call petroleum. Petroleum's primary use is transportation. We refine it into gasoline. We take our raw petroleum, fractionally distill it to create different materials. Gasoline is one of them, but it also can be used to create a lot of industrial products, such as aspirin and even plastics. 34.7% of America's total energy consumption comes from petroleum. Texas, Alaska, and California are the leading states that produce petroleum. So even though we do bring in petroleum from Canada and the Middle East, we also are creating a fair amount of our own petroleum within the United States. Petroleum is transported by barrel and or pipeline, depending on where it's coming from. Natural gas is another fossil fuel. It's colorless and odorless. Its primary use is heating. In fact, natural gas heats half of the nation's homes. Natural gas is probably what's firing up your furnace at home. We use it in our stoves. We use it to heat. This chemical that we're burning is called methane. We refer to it as natural gas, but it's a very specific natural gas. Although we use natural gas to heat our homes, to cook, etc., industry is the largest consumer of natural gas. So that means that natural gas is used to create new things. It's a cleaner burning fossil fuel, which means when you burn gasoline versus natural gas, you give off less potentially hazardous byproducts. Natural gas is transported by pipeline. Coal is our third fossil fuel. It's also non-renewable. When coal's gone, it's gone. The primary use for coal is generating electricity. In fact, 42.2% of the nation's electricity is generated by burning coal. It generates such a high percentage of our nation's electricity because we've relied on it for so many years and because it's America's most abundant fossil fuel. And we create a lot or find a lot right within America. Wyoming, West Virginia, and Kentucky are the leading states that produce coal. Once the coal is mined from the ground, it's transported by train. Propane is another fossil fuel often used in America. It's created by processing a natural gas and petroleum. It's colorless and odorless gas that is compressed down to a liquid, so it's easier to transport in smaller tanks. The primary use of propane is heating. It only accounts for 1.6% of the nation's energy. It's portable and it's great for creating heat. We often see propane tanks on grills. Used most often in rural areas and on farms. This is because it's portable and it's great for providing natural gas where natural gas lines are not currently installed. Uranium is our only non-renewable energy source that is not a fossil fuel. Uranium is a material, a rock that we dig up, and then we use it to create heat through nuclear fission. Uranium U-235 atoms collide with one another, giving off an immense amount of energy. That heat energy eventually creates electricity. It supplies about 19.2% of the U.S.'s current electricity. The U.S. has about 100 reactors in the U.S. However, as reactors are closing, they are not reopening. So the overall number of reactors is decreasing over time. Despite that, we still lead the world in production of nuclear energy. The problem with nuclear energy is that the spent fuel waste can be dangerous. Nuclear fuel rods are still radioactive after use. When we mine the uranium, we mill it down into thin rods that then process the fission, giving off heat and creating electricity. Power plants currently are storing these spent fuel waste on site. A long-term storage plan has not been determined. Some plans, such as storing these uranium rods or fuel rods in the base of mountains or deep within mountains, have been considered, but nothing has finally been decided on.